Let the word go
The
forth.
challenge, the opportunity to connect. The 1960s, a time of imagination and change, a time of anger and fear. The 1960s, a pioneering program called Challenge.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
That looked at our connections, our divisions, through the lens of shared values.
For something real.
60 years later, we examine our divisions, our connections, our shared pains and successes in a new program called Challenge 2.0. This massive fir long sheltered Stillicum residents from November gales and December storms. But it could not shelter them from January heartache, particularly the family of a Stillicum High School student whose life ended at this tree in 2023. It's now covered with memorials to Reese Widman, his life, his accomplishments, and the positive impact he had on so many. In the prior 2 episodes of Challenge, we focused on the circumstances leading to the suicide death of Reese. We spoke with some of his teammates, each touched by their friendship and time together, each with a deepened appreciation of friends and family, each determined to help prevent future such tragedies.
Definitely caring. He cared about everyone.
Just back to cherishing the moments you have with your family and your friends and all that. And then I feel that, just by looking at the shirt, just looking at the one day at a time, it could just, if I'm feeling down, look at this, just remember the times, that I got to spend with Reese and just look back at them and just smile.
The main problem we face is vulnerability, and people are just scared to open up.
We learned how Reese's friends, his mother and father, Kelly and Corey, organized an effort called Whitty's Work that now spreads beyond Stillicum, beyond Washington State, to respond to Reese's final request, to help others do what he couldn't do, get help. Study after study, and the hard experience of physicians, counselors, teachers, and families show teen suicide is increasing, that the end of the social isolation of COVID has not reversed that trend, and that suicides are now increasing among preteens. In this final episode of An Epidemic of Despair, we do a deep dive into this broader tragedy and examine recommendations for effective solutions and interventions. Well, if you've joined us over the past 2 episodes, the past 2 weeks of Challenge 2.0, you've heard the story of Reese Widman, his untimely death, and getting some new perspectives and how that has really given rise to some whole new approaches much needed within the field of mental health. We would like to again welcome this week Kelly and Corey Widman, Reese's parents, and again Dr. Bonnie Jordan, who is joining us, and Elizabeth Gracier, who is a counselor. Bonnie, being a pediatrician, you wear several different hats, as the saying goes, and perhaps you need to share something in terms of which one of those hats you're sharing your perspectives from.
Yes, thank you. So I am an active duty pediatrician. It's important that I share that today any insights and thoughts I have are those of my own and not that of the U.S. military.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your service as well. I think it leads naturally to where we're at this week, looking at the broader aspect of youth suicide in particular. What exactly is the scope of youth suicide? Have we seen it changing in recent years? And is it largely focused within a given age range? And whichever one of you would like to address that first.
Yeah, I can go ahead. The statistics are staggering, actually. Suicide is the 11th leading cause of death for all ages in the United States. It's the second leading cause of death for youth 10 to 24 years old.
The second leading cause?
Mm-hmm. The first leading cause of death is for unintentional accidents with all types can. So if we were to drill down and specify, it would likely be the first leading cause of death in that age group. Specifically in our youth population. And if we look at the numbers, CDC collects data on this, and the last year that they collected data was around 22,000 youth were victims of suicide. And so the scope is huge. No one is protected. All races, cultures, genders can be affected by suicide. We know there are certain risk factors that might elevate the risk, but if we just look at a population level, it's scary, and we need to do something about it. And so I'm very grateful to be here today to have the opportunity to participate in something that can help change.
If I can also mention too, Washington state rates are slightly higher than the rest of the nation. And I know as therapists, they've implemented taking our continuing ed units just to deal with suicide, but our rates are about 16.6, and nationally it's about 14.5. So we also have that we're also working with in the state of Washington.
One of the things that stunned me in looking at some of the statistics as I tried to prepare for this was that suicide rates among college athletes have doubled over the last 2 decades. As professionals, do you have any sense of why that is?
So it is true. Rates have doubled in our college athletes. The average age for college athletes dying by suicide is about 20 years old. Yep. And it's about 77% male versus female. And that I don't know that we have a lot of information as to why that is. Mm-hmm. There are some thoughts that it's a combination of both the physical and mental stressors at the elite athlete level. Sure. Physical stressors just including the toll on the body, and then injuries and how that might play into an injury that might alter someone's perception of the way things may go, or the depressive thoughts that may go along with that. And then some of the mental stressors as that are being involved in collegiate level athletics. But I don't know that we can say it's all due to athletics, right? Athletics certainly have protective factors for our youth. And if we just look at the numbers in general and the trend of suicide for youth increasing as well, it's a little bit more complex than looking at just the college athletes. But we do know that there is worry in that population and that we need to be more attuned into how we can support and protect that population.
Liz, I might ask you, one of the things that I've heard discussed was that I got the feeling this is not just a high school problem. And granted, that age range is a very challenging age range. I can remember just when I was growing up, and certainly the pressures seemed to be much greater. What is the range of ages that seem to be falling into these statistics?
Honestly, especially elderly, you might be surprised to hear that. We have elderly people. Suicide is also high among them. And then specifically, like 40 and under seems to be some of where we have our highest rates of suicide. I'm interested to see when we have a little bit more of a time frame after COVID, how that may also be impacted.
True. What is sort of the range of things that lead young people to consider suicide, and what different strategies are needed to basically address those?
I don't know that we fully understand all of the factors that can lead a young person or a girl down that pathway. Certainly, there are some risk factors that we can identify, and there may be, multiple events that lead down a pathway. But I don't know that we could ever identify a singular cause. If we nerd out a little bit, just go into genetics, there seems to be some genetic predisposition. We do see suicides kind of in the family lineage, so to speak. And then risk factors, if we think stereotypical risk factors, a child who's been bullied or who is isolated socially, but clearly that's not always the case. We know that there's increased risk of suicide for persons who identify as a gender or sexual minority. And those rates are actually significantly higher than average. And also individuals with neurodevelopmental disabilities or autism, it's about 8 times the lifetime risk for completed suicide. So there are some individualized risk factors there. Going back to the second part of your question, what can we do? How do we, inform risk? There's a lot of things that we can do to help our youth and to help our friends and family who might be experiencing some struggle. But it all starts with that conversation, having a conversation and talking about it, asking the question, feeling comfortable asking someone directly, how are you feeling? Great, you don't have a cough today, but how are you doing mentally?
Yeah.
Have you been feeling down? Have you thought about harming yourself? Just asking the question can do so much help. And so I think that's our first place to start.
And we did do that with Reese, and I think I just like to add, I don't think that Reese realized what he was fighting against, because as we sit here now and talking to Liz and Bonnie and Kelly and myself over the last 18 months, I mean, we're all 99.9% sure that his medication was the biggest factor. And at the time, I didn't even think that would be an issue, because it's helping his epilepsy, realizing that he's fighting something that we can't see, and he didn't even know to ask, And I mean, so many times he would just tell us, in November, December, oh, it's just something I got to figure out on my own. I mean, and he did get, banged up at a practice once, and you could tell, I mean, his mood went, baseball was the one thing that you never wanted to take away from the guy. And so when he was hurt or he couldn't play, yeah, he was noticeably, distraught, different. But the medicine, the unseen and the unknown, that's where, my biggest regret is. And that's what I told you in the first episode,
right?
My guilt, and I should have known better. I should have been able to see it.
I don't want to lose a strand of how do we respond to some of these people that are facing challenges in other things, bullying, gender identity, etc. But we talked about the medication issue, and you just watch television nowadays and you see advertisements for medications that at the end of them, usually in fairly small print, they'll say it can cause depression or suicidal ideation. So, Dr. Jordan, I might begin with you. What's been your experience with that?
So it is absolutely true that many of the medications we use clinically for a variety of contexts can increase depression or suicidal ideation, suicide risk. Anti-epileptics are one of those categories. In fact, there is a black box warning. Anti-epileptic medications, I believe it started around 2008, warning that there's an increased risk of suicidality with these medications. And talking with a pediatric neurology colleague that I'm close with, the studies that kind of unfolded with that show that there's an increased risk of suicidality as well, just from epilepsy. And it's hard to tease out how much is the medication and is not. However, clinically, individuals who are on medications that start to experience the depression and suicidality, if we know, hey, this is the risk, oftentimes we can come off that medication, switch to something else, and sometimes we see, hey, there's an improvement. But as highlighted here, we need to know, the patient needs to know, the family needs to know, that the doctor needs to know, right? We need to be aware of it. But it's not just our anti-epileptic medications. Unfortunately, even the medications that are first line for treating depression, anxiety, carry that same warning, that when we set out to say, hey, you've got severe depression, let's help you. And when we use pharmacology as one of those routes, we know that the medications do increase risk of suicidal thoughts and behaviors, especially within the first 1 to 2 months of therapy. And so it is a very delicate balance of informing the child, informing the parents, the caregivers, working with the family to make sure that we're doing benefit and not harm, and just being very open about that risk, so that if we start to see things go in the direction we don't want them to go,
right,
we can make a change. What's less commonly known is even many of the medications we use for other things carry that risk, even if they don't have that black box warning. Acne medications, there's some popular acne medications on there that can do wonders for someone's confidence and mental health.
Right.
They have such severe scarring acne and that they go to clear skin. That can be wonderfully positive for a person. However, those medications are well known to cause increase in suicidality as well. Hormonal medications, whether they're used for contraceptive or other purposes, can increase suicidality. Steroids, we use those, for asthma and skin disorders. So there are several different areas where I think in the medical field, we should be aiming to do a better job to inform our family and to inform ourselves, and
just partnering so we know what to watch for so that we can avoid the medications doing harm. And I don't know a single medical provider who wants to do harm, but it's
Right.
better knowledge.
I was going to ask, and I might address that question to you, Liz, how much coordination is there between the medical field if somebody is being treated with medication of this sort, either suggesting that they or their family members seek counseling so that you can make them aware of what they need to be looking out for, and just both in terms of the young person but also their family?
It really depends. In the current position I'm in, I don't have access to those records. In previous positions I have, so I'd have to ask for release. That being stated, best practice, in my opinion, and one of the things that I first thought of when you were speaking was frequently we put people on ADHD meds, even adults on depression meds, seeking no mental health counseling. I went on this medication. This is supposed to make it better. Now I have to see somebody for 50 minutes a week. But studies routinely, peer-reviewed research shows that hand in hand, those two together will in fact increase your course of treatment and your success in treatment. So honestly, I am seeing more and more. While we're not there yet, I know, for example, on base, there is a therapist that's in the 0 to 3 clinic. It would be wonderful social workers, marriage and family therapists, or mental health counselors could be placed in offices. Right now, I'm not aware of that happening frequently, and it is more of they come to us already at that state. But there should be, and the best practice would be to have a greater level of collaboration. So that the other thing is when I'm meeting somebody every week, I'm having typically, or a therapist, that ability then to create that alignment with the family and the client or student so that I can then talk with their primary care physician.
So we have an opportunity in terms of the program we're doing. People watching might have someone within their family, within their circle of acquaintance, who are taking medication, or at least this is being discussed. What would you recommend to them in terms of their receptivity to and possible recourse to seeking counseling as part of the overall treatment?
I think it's best, just like I'm also a marriage and family therapist, and I always say people come to me when they're already headed towards divorce. Do a checkup. It's not going to hurt. Check up, how are you sleeping? I ask these questions. How much caffeine are you having every day? How are you keeping up with your coursework? And some of those things, when we think about therapy, I'm talking, but I like to have we have measurable goals.
Mm-hmm.
If you're only sleeping 6 hours a night and waking up, but what can we do to get to 7? And sometimes working with young people about how do we address those goals so that we can, in fact, increase your mental health. So I would encourage students and parents to encourage, come talk to the counselor, the school counselor. Email us. Students can email me in a class if they're having really bad anxiety. I'm like, I don't want them out of class all the time. Let me be clear on that. But shoot me an email. If I can come and get you, I will come and get you out of class. So don't be afraid to ask, even if it's for something like that. Reach out to us and let us know.
Corey, I saw you had a point.
At New Level, after Reese and Solo's passing, the ownership and leadership implemented a sports performance program called Master Your Mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, we talk exactly about that, and it's called prehab. We do all these things after the fact, but what are we doing before it? And sometimes that's probably the most important work.
Well, I might ask, we know that if somebody's having a medical emergency, you call 911.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything like that for people that are having a mental health emergency?
Yeah. So I think we're all familiar with it now. There's the 988, which is the National Crisis and Suicide Lifeline.
988.
And what's so brilliant about that is you can text it or call it. And many of our teenagers and youth are much more comfortable texting than they are on the phone. And while as an old person, I would say I would so much rather them call and talk to someone in person. If the way that youth needs to get help is to text that line, that's a viable option. And so I've actually, with several patients who we have identified suicidal ideations in clinic, we've sat down, we've called the 988 line together so that I can give them an example. And I've said, hey, this is Dr. Jordan, and I'm calling with my patient so-and-so, and they're having some thoughts, and right now they're safe. And they always start with what is the immediacy.
Right.
And then it's, hey, I just want them to know that you're here and that you can talk to them. And that same model of like, we can show people that this line works. I've seen happen in the military. I'm not advocating everyone call all the time. We don't want to, fill their lines,
Right.
but that line is available, and you can talk to someone immediately. They are trained to handle acute suicidality. They are trained to talk someone through what they're feeling, and they are trained to help mobilize resources if there's an immediate need to mobilize a resource, such as police, fire, or a mobile crisis unit.
So we've covered that 988 number. Any other advice that you'd give to a young person that's watching, or someone concerned about a young person, in terms of the best way for them to turn if they're experiencing this themselves?
I would encourage 980 as well, or talk to your primary care physician. And just to reiterate, it's 24/7, 365. I've encouraged even some of my students at St. Martin's, it doesn't just have to be for suicide, a horrible breakup. If you make that call when you're already feeling very depressed or in crisis, I'll have people tell me, well, you're not available at 2 a.m. That they are. If you start that and get comfortable, okay, I can call. And most of the time, resources are not sent out. Typically, it is resolved. This number I do want to also mention is only 2 years old. Different states had different numbers. It was 10 digits. 988 is very simple, and it works across the United States. So if you're traveling, or as a young person, you can call it Christmas Day at 2 a.m. out of any state in the United States.
There was a Harvard University study that I read that said that for every person that dies from suicide, there are at least 6 other surviving victims of that suicide. What would you advise them? Others don't always seems, and based on our prior conversation, they don't always know how to best respond to that person. I might begin with you two, Corey and Kelly. What do you find most helpful?
I think people's response to us has been that they're just being there, and the support that people have offered us has been amazing. In the weeks right after Reese passed away, our house was full. Like, we had family and friends just there with us and kind of just taking care of business. A meal train was set up, and our friends, community, my coworkers, they just really rallied and just made anything as easy as possible for us to be there with us.
I would just say, again, prehab, let's help each other before we're in this spot.
Yeah.
And make like our community, they've been good to us and really loved us and lifted us up. And
keep doing that.
Right. Let's keep it up. And that's mine and Kelly's mission and goal. Reese asked us to do it, and we're going to do it. We're going to make sure nobody else has to feel this pain.
Liz and Bonnie, I'd ask you for your perspectives. What do you find given your professional and personal experience, is most useful for intervening or helping someone that's survived the loss of a family member or friend, fellow student?
Oftentimes people don't know what to say, and so they often then don't say anything at all. They don't reach out because they don't want to be a burden, or they don't want to fumble and say the wrong thing. And generally what I advise people to do is, if you don't know what to say hello. I don't really know what to say, but I'm here for you.
Yep.
And asking, listening, and then remembering that loss and grief is not a short-term experience. Term experience. I think there's a lot of studies that show in the immediate aftermath of a crisis, there's often a big response, and then that response dwindles over time. So when everyone else moves into their day-to-day life, families and survivors don't move into the day-to-day life in that same way, right? And so just remembering that the timeline for supporting individuals really is the timeline that they need support, not the timeline that you think they need support.
This again, I'm just going to reiterate the 988. We're here, ready to help.
So this is the third of 3 programs that we've done. And Corey and Kelly, I just reiterate what a gift this has been. And thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. I'd like to invite you to close this. Any last thoughts that you'd share?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He was a great man, great kid.
And we just want to carry on his legacy.
It would seem from just the limited perspective I've had that you're doing a wonderful job on that, and thank you so much. I think as we've seen the pictures and some video, your loss is definitely our loss, and not having had that opportunity to get to know him and see him grow into the amazing person that he already was. So thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Jordan, and thank you, Liz, very much. We thank you for joining us on this edition of Challenge 2.0. We've put up some resources that we hope you'll follow through on, and the availability of counseling and medical help, and that other people are out there and the people that care. So thank you for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again in the next edition of Challenge 2.0.